The coffee pot gurgled like it always did at 6:15. Outside, the snow hadn't let up overnight. It wasn't heavy, just enough to dull the color of everything, like the world had chosen a grayscale filter. The kids were still sleeping. I could hear Rowdy's little breaths from the room across the hall, the kind that puffed out like he was blowing dreams into the air. I didn't have the heart to wake them yet. Thatcher didn't say goodbye. He never did anymore. The front door clicked shut, and that was it. No words, no glance. He used to touch the small of my back on the way out, just 2 fingers and a nod. That had stopped months ago. The silence between us had grown roots. I'd talk less because he looked at the floor. He talked less because I cried into dishwater. It wasn't hate. Just where? Like we'd both been trying to carry grief on our backs and had forgotten we could pass it between us. I sat at the edge of the bed and picked up the onesie that had never been worn. Pale blue, still smelled like baby detergent and a name we never got to say out loud. I folded it carefully and set it in the box of what could have been, then stood up and walked to the mirror. I didn't look at myself. The note I left wasn't long. I can't live inside grief forever. I didn't pack much, just the essentials: phone, ID, the folder of documents I'd kept hidden, proof I existed beyond just being his wife. I left the framed photos, the ones with our smiles frozen at barbecues and baptisms. Let him have the evidence of the happy parts. When he came home, I wouldn't be there. No yelling, no crying. Just absence. A hole where a person used to be. He'd call. He'd get voicemail. He wouldn't leave a message. The kids would ask, "Where's Mommy?" He'd say, "She's visiting Grandma." Lie smooth, lie clean. Just like every other, everything's fine. He'd fed me while I bled on the bathroom tile. There's a thing that happens when someone leaves you quietly. You don't realize they're gone until their echo doesn't answer back. Thatcher told a coworker I'd taken a break. What he didn't know was that Verlene Cardoza had already offered me a position in her new media division, told me I had presence and resilience. She was good at seeing what could be monetized. I was convenient, grieving but photogenic, broken but presentable. She didn't know I had already left. I'd made up my mind in the hospital when the nurse asked if I wanted to hold him. I did. But I also didn't. Thatcher held me like I was glass. I think he thought I would crack. But I'd already shattered inside, and when he said, "We'll get through this," all I could think was, I don't want to get through anymore. I want out. Grief wasn't our bridge, it was our excuse. He drank cold coffee the next morning. Same mug, same silence. Only now it was just his. I didn't want to go to Maudine's. But I needed to understand if anyone in that bloodline knew how to feel something real. She opened the door just a crack. Still wore that same stale perfume, same expression like she'd smelled something sour. I said, "I'm not here to fight." She looked at me like I was a door-to-door saleswoman, then calmly like it was a weather report. "At least now she has a future." She meant me, but it wasn't comfort. It was dismissal, like Thatcher had been the delay, the drag, the deadweight. Her tone told me everything, that the only mistake in her eyes was how long I stayed. I walked back to my car. The driveway was the same one Thatcher used to shovel clear, just so I wouldn't slip. Now it felt like it belonged to someone else. The same road I once brought flowers down, now told me not to come back. By the time I turned into the driveway, the kids were out cold in the back seat, their heads tilted at impossible angles, mouths half open, jackets undone. The grocery bags rustled next to me, full of the cheap stuff I could still stretch into meals. I remember thinking I'd finally gotten a handle on this, on life without her, on Tuesday nights, on peanut butter, on existing. And then I saw it, taped dead center on the door, flapping just slightly in the wind like it couldn't wait to be read, was a paper I didn't recognize, but I already knew. Eviction notice. My name wasn't on the deed, never had been. I'd never cared. We were a family. You don't think you need protection from someone who used to finish your sentences? It was from her lawyer, signed, stamped. I sat there for a second, both hands still on the steering wheel. No radio, no heater. Just the crack of snow melting against the windshield and the slow crawl of a thought I couldn't shake. She really did it. The neighbors across the street opened their blinds halfway, then closed them again, One porch light went off. Not because it was too bright, because I was too visible. I didn't wake the kids. I couldn't. I just pulled back out onto the road, drove in circles, not toward anywhere in particular, just away. I don't remember how long I drove. 40 minutes, maybe more. The snow had started back up again, soft this time, like it pitied me. Eventually, I pulled into the parking lot behind a small church, the kind that keeps its lights on even when no one's inside. I parked in the corner, didn't turn off the engine, just leaned back, eyes open. Rowdy stirred in the back. His voice was groggy, barely awake. "Is Mommy still mad?" I didn't answer at first. I just looked at him through the rearview mirror, his hair messy, one sock gone, clutching his little stuffed lizard like it was oxygen. "Get some rest, buddy," I finally said. I draped my coat over him and watched his breath settle. The heater hummed. My heart didn't. I thought about calling her. Again. But the voicemail would hit before the first ring. This wasn't a separation. It was erasure. The next morning, I got to school early. Earlier than I needed to be. I wanted to avoid being noticed, but somehow the earlier you are, the more eyes you catch. The line was already forming. Parents with thermoses, winter boots, conversations I couldn't hear, but could feel in the way they glanced sideways at me. I walked the boys in, holding Rowdy's hand, my shoulders tight. Before I could turn to leave, a school aide stepped up to me. She wasn't harsh, just too soft. "Mr. Durrell, I'm sorry, but Lorinda updated the emergency contact forms last week. You're not currently listed." I blinked. What does that mean? It means you'll need written permission to pick them up moving forward, for security. The word stung, like I was a threat. Behind me, someone muttered, "Deadbeat, huh?" I didn't turn around. I didn't argue. You lose the right to yell when your name's been quietly deleted from forms you didn't even know existed. I walked back to the car with hands too empty for a man who'd just dropped off his sons. They were still mine, whether a piece of paper said so or not. By Friday, I'd jumped through enough hoops to pick up Rowdy. That meant waiting, signing, smiling through someone else's protocol. He ran out the front door with a paper snowflake in one hand and a bento box in the other. "Daddy number 2 brought me lunch today." I froze. "Who?" Rowdy pointed back at the school. "Verlene's guy. He gave it to Miss Shea to bring me. Look, it had tiny strawberries and weird green stuff." "Avocado?" He nodded. "Yeah, I didn't eat that. I like your sandwiches better." I smiled and opened the door for him, but inside me, something heavy dropped. Not because I felt threatened, because no one had asked me if it was okay to be replaced. That night, I cleaned out the kids' lunchbox drawer, threw out 2 half-used jars of peanut butter, washed the sandwich cutters, sat down on the floor of the kitchen and held the lid of the dinosaur-themed lunchbox I'd bought for Rowdy last Christmas. I stayed there a while, didn't cry, didn't curse, just listened to the fridge hum. I used to think grief was loud. Turns out the worst part is when nobody even notices you're bleeding. They didn't just erase me from the house. They started rewriting me out of my children's story. The back kitchen wasn't much, no windows, one leaky faucet, the kind of place you rent because no one else will. But it had a stove that worked and a lock on the door. After 2 weeks sleeping on my buddy Jeremy's porch, those 2 things felt like luxury. I moved in with a duffel, a pot, and a plan. Every night, I cooked whatever I could afford, soups thick with beans, casseroles that could stretch over 2 days. By lunch, I'd ladle them into to-go containers and hustle out to the construction sites nearby. No license, no menu, just heat and hope. And somehow, folks kept coming back. I peeled potatoes under a flickering bulb and let my mind drift. I thought about Eppie's laugh. Taverner's way of reading labels out loud like he was practicing to be important. Rowdy's hands always sticky from syrup, reaching for my ears. The cold cracked my fingers. Didn't matter. That kitchen became the last place I still felt like a father. I didn't tell Zilla, not yet. She'd ask questions I didn't want to answer. And the truth was, I didn't want help. Not because I didn't need it, but because if I waited for help, I'd be waiting until I was forgotten. It was a Thursday when she walked in. Verlene Cardosa. Gold earrings. Designer trench. lipstick so sharp it looked drawn with a ruler. She brought 2 assistants, girls who looked like they'd never held a spatula, much less scrubbed a pan. They slid into a booth like they were slumming it for content. Verlene ordered a bowl of lentil stew. I didn't flinch, just kept my hands moving. She took one bite, smiled without warmth, and said, "I thought you'd at least be doing food trucks by now." Silence spread across the diner. Not dramatic, just stiff. Like the room exhaled and forgot how to breathe. I wiped down the counter and didn't say a word. Then Marla, regular since day 2, lived in the trailer park near 14th, stood up. She looked Verlene in the eye and said, "His soup's kept me alive this winter. You got anything better than that, lady?" Verlene didn't blink, just laughed lightly, left the bowl untouched, and walked out. The bell above the door rang like punctuation. End of her sentence. Beginning of mine. That night, I unrolled the inflatable mattress behind a wall of flour bags. The plastic hissed as it expanded. I used 2 aprons for a pillow and folded my coat over my chest. Zilla came by. She didn't say much, just looked around, her eyes catching the duct-taped space heater and the tray of prepped onions. She didn't ask where I was sleeping. Just came back the next night with a better sleeping bag and left it without a word. Some people love you in big, noisy ways. Others just make sure you wake up warm. I started writing menu ideas on napkins. Cornbread chili bake. Creamy squash soup. Mac cheese, no shame. Hope looks small at first, but it fills space fast if you let it. And Tavner turned 12 that week. I wasn't supposed to see him, no legal visitation, nothing in writing, so I wrapped a paperback copy of The Hobbit, wrote a note on the inside cover. "To my favorite adventurer, love Dad," and dropped it at the front desk of his school. That night, my phone rang. Blocked number. I almost didn't pick up. "Thanks, Dad," he said, voice low. "I wanted to give something to Mom, too, but I didn't know if that would upset you." I closed my eyes. That moment, that edge where resentment could have bloomed. "You don't need my permission to be kind, son." He paused. "Are you mad at her?" I breathed once. "Not anymore. I'm just trying not to disappear." He didn't respond right away. Then, "The book was perfect." We hung up. I went back to chopping onions, not because I needed to, but because it gave me something to do besides disappear. I had learned how to live with less of everything, less space, less sleep, less family. But when she came back swinging for custody, I realized they hadn't just moved on, they wanted to move me out for good. The knock wasn't loud, just 2 firm taps, sharp enough to break the rhythm of my stirring pot. I wiped my hands, opened the back door of the diner, and there he stood, mid-40s, official badge around his neck, holding a manila envelope like it was something sacred. "For Mr. Thatcher Durrell," he said, no eye contact. I nodded, took it, closed the door. No drama, just paperwork. Inside, custody modification request. Filed by Lorinda's attorney. Unfit, financially unstable, lacking safe housing. That's how they described me. The same guy who hadn't missed a school lunch in 4 months. The same man who warmed soup for strangers just to keep the lights on. The irony bit harder than any insult could have. She stood tall, on the foundation of everything I built, while calling the ground I stood on unworthy. I didn't tear it up, didn't yell, just sat on a milk crate, opened to the first page again, and read every line like it was scripture. "She wants the kids, but she doesn't want the cost of having kept them. Legal aid said they were full, 3 months minimum before they could assign me help. That is, if the budget held. Private attorneys wanted $5,000 just to skim the paperwork. I didn't even have 500. One guy offered me a payment plan. Said, it's not impossible, just uncomfortable. He had no clue I was already sleeping behind sacks of flour. I posted online, some anonymous dad's forum, thinking maybe someone would know a loophole, a back door. Instead, I got judged. If she's the stable one, why are you pushing this? Don't be selfish. Kids need consistency. If you really cared, you'd walk away to keep the peace. I closed the browser, pulled out a notepad, drew a line down the middle, left side, what I didn't have, right side, what I did. Under have, I wrote, they've never gone hungry, not once. That was enough for that night. 2 days later, Verlene's face showed up on a local blog. She wasn't just a boss now, she was a philanthropist, a healer, the kind of woman who opened her home to a struggling mother after emotional abuse. That's how the article put it. They didn't use my name, but they didn't have to. Anyone with Wi-Fi could piece it together. Verlene looked flawless in the photos. Brushed out waves, soft lighting, the right earrings. Lorinda stood beside her, holding Rowdy like a prop, smiling with the practiced grief of someone who had mastered recovery branding. She just wants to raise her kids in peace, the article said. I laughed, then printed the whole page. Then I printed the grocery receipts, the school sign-in logs, every lunchbox note I'd packed with crayon-scribbled hearts, not to fight them, but to remind myself I hadn't made it all up. The kitchen became a war room. Zilla walked in one night and saw the folders stacked between tomato cans and the register. She didn't ask, just grabbed a marker and started labeling them. Receipts, photos, witnesses, emails. I didn't thank her. Didn't need to. When she left, I practiced my answers out loud. Why do you want partial custody, Mr. Durrell? Because I show up, even when I'm exhausted, even when I've been erased. I still show up. I packed care boxes for each kid. Nothing fancy. Their favorite granola bars, comic books from the dollar bin, socks that still had the fuzz inside. Each box had a note, same handwriting I'd always used. Eppie's said, "When you're scared, remember who stays." Tavner's, "When you feel lost, remember who watched you find yourself." Rowdy's, "No matter where you sleep, I'll always be awake for you." I didn't know if they'd ever get them, but I packed them anyway. The courts weren't the only ones being asked to judge me. The world had already made up its mind. And just when I thought it couldn't get more public, they brought cameras to the one place I still called mine. It started with a sponsored post. I was scrolling between orders, wiping down counters, when I saw the headline, "Single Mom Fights for Peaceful Parenting Amid Toxic Backlash." Lorinda's photo lit up my screen. She was standing at a charity booth, hair styled just enough, holding Rowdy on her hip while Tavner smiled beside her. Eppie, half smiling, stared off camera like she wanted to be anywhere else. My name wasn't there, not even in the fine print. But the lines hit like bullets. She never wanted it to be a battle, but some people fight even love. I closed the tab, waited 10 seconds, reopened it, took a screenshot, another, saved them all. Because when you're the one being erased, you learn to document every cut they pretend isn't bleeding. 2 days later, Zilla held out her phone with that same look she gets when she's about to tell me someone died. A clip from a morning talk show. Lorinda, crying just enough, voice gentle. No eyeliner running. Controlled vulnerability. "She's been through so much," the host said, "but she keeps showing up." The segment was titled, "Motherhood After Pain." I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Zilla waited, then asked, "You okay?" I shrugged. It's easy to win when you pick the judge, jury, and director. The world didn't want my side of the story. They wanted hers, neatly packaged and pre-approved by a PR intern. I didn't post a rebuttal, didn't write a think piece. I've seen what happens to men who speak out when the narrative's already been handed out like flyers. This wasn't about custody anymore. It was branding, and I was the villain in someone else's commercial. I picked up Eppie from tutoring that Thursday. She barely said 2 words the entire ride, stared out the window like it was her job. At a red light, I glanced over and caught her fidgeting with her sleeve, same habit Lorinda has when she's hiding a thought. At home, as she dropped her backpack by the couch, she finally turned. "Why do you hate her so much?" The question didn't land like an accusation. It landed like something she'd rehearsed in her head too many times. "Is that what she told you?" I asked. "No, but you never say anything good about her. Maybe she's just trying to fix things." I sat down slowly, letting her see my hands stay steady. "What if the truth doesn't fix anything?" She didn't answer, just nodded like she heard me, but not enough to believe me. That night, I passed her room and saw the glow of her screen. She was re-watching the talk show clip. She didn't look away when I walked by. 2 mornings later, she walked into the kitchen while I was chopping carrots. "Maybe you're the one who can't forgive," she said, not looking up. My hand stopped mid-slice. I set the knife down slowly. Looked at her. Really looked. Forgiving someone doesn't mean pretending they didn't leave. Still no eye contact. Still no reply. She turned and walked out, her footsteps too quiet for a girl her age. I whispered to the empty room. "And staying doesn't mean I'm not broken too." But no one was left to hear that part. There's something lonelier than losing someone. It's losing the version of yourself you were when they still believed you. I thought the kitchen was the only place they wouldn't touch. But then she walked in, cameras following like shadows. The night before the opening, I stayed late. The new signage had gone up. Small, nothing flashy, just Thatcher's table. That was all I could afford, and maybe all I needed. I printed name cards with the kids' quotes on them. Eppie's said, "Dad taught me how to trust my voice." Taverner's was about pancakes. Rowdy's just had a stick figure holding a spoon. It made people smile. That was enough. The warehouse-turned-kitchen still smelled like sawdust and cleaner. I wiped down the tables one more time, told myself tomorrow would be quiet, warm, focused on the food. The morning didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a test. There was a van outside when I arrived, logoed, camera equipment piled in the back seat. Inside, she stood, Lorinda, dressed for TV, not for heat. Kids beside her. Someone from a lifestyle segment introduced herself like she owned the room. "I thought it would be good press for the children," Lorinda said, like this was a bake sale. Not a landmine. Halfway through the event, while I was plating a batch of meatloaf sliders, the cameras turned, not toward the food, toward her. She stepped up with a smile rehearsed enough to be muscle memory. "We'd like to make a surprise donation," she said, arm around Eppie, "on behalf of Verlene's Wellness Initiative." Applause. Camera shutters. A reporter grabbed me near the prep station. "How does it feel to have your ex support your business?" My throat tightened. I looked him square. "She's not supporting my business. She's branding her motherhood." They caught the soundbite. That was enough. My image never made the segment. The video that aired that night? Just Lorinda, hugging kids, slicing ribbon, holding my son's hand like a prop. I wasn't cropped out. I was never included. Back in the supply closet, Zilla cornered me. "You can't let her own your space and your story," she said. I nodded. Not because I agreed, because I already knew. Eppie's school held a showcase the following Friday. Her project, an essay titled "Parenting Through Struggle." She won first prize. On stage, she thanked both my parents in a clear voice. I stood in the back, proud, quiet. Then Lorinda stepped forward, holding a check. "This is a contribution from the Verlene Foundation," she said, "in honor of Eppie's strength." People clapped. Cameras flashed. No mention of who helped her write the draft, who stayed up checking citations. That night, Eppie posted a photo from the event. Group shot. Lorinda tagged center. Me? Tagged in the caption, spelled wrong. I didn't say anything. Didn't text to correct it. Some silences aren't passive. They're chosen. Because yelling into noise just makes you part of it. A former coworker called the next morning. "Didn't know you were working under your ex now," he chuckled. "What?" "Yeah, there's a blog going around, pictures from your event, Eppie's award, the whole thing." Says it's all part of Lorinda's new co-parenting initiative. The title, "How a Strong Mother Revived Her Broken Family Through Co-Parenting." I clicked the link. Scrolled. My name wasn't there. No quote, no mention. I wasn't even a footnote in my own life. I closed the tab, opened my business site, went to the About Us page, changed the bio. Owner, father, builder of things no one thought I could fix. Zilla read it later that night, smiled. "You're not erasing her," she said. "You're just finally writing you back in." She was right, and I wasn't done yet. The next time they tried to erase me, I didn't raise my voice. I raised the volume on the truth. They thought branding would win the story, but I had something better. Proof that didn't need edits. The alarm never rang. I woke up before it did. The kitchen was still dark, save for the soft green glow of the coffee maker. I didn't turn on the lights, just sat down at the folding table with a mug in one hand and a highlighter in the other. The folders were laid out in front of me like a battlefield. Receipts, transcripts, attendance logs, photos, everything I could gather that showed I'd been present, even when they pretended I wasn't. But for a second, none of it felt like enough. That's when Zilla walked in. She didn't ask anything, just looked at me, still in her coat, and said, "When you're too quiet, people forget you're still listening." I didn't respond, but something inside me shifted. I pushed the mug aside and started building something else, a private drive, folder after folder, time-stamped memos, screenshots, call logs, audio clips. I wasn't collecting evidence anymore. I was documenting the truth. It came from a bakery. One of my old clients, a small business owner named Ren, sent me a voice memo she'd recorded by accident over a year ago. She had attended Verlene's launch party, the one that started this whole brand machine of redemption arcs and co-parenting fairy tales. In the background, amid laughter and clinking glasses, Lorinda's voice came through. "I don't need to love them. I just need the image. The mother card plays well." Ren said she kept it because she didn't want to get involved. She didn't want to hurt Lorinda. But after seeing the interviews, the articles, the headlines, she couldn't sit on it anymore. Zilla listened to the clip twice. "You don't need a rebuttal," she said flatly. "You need a speaker." She called a contact, not a reporter, a parent group moderator. Within 48 hours, the clip made its way through inboxes across town. Not front page, not flashy, but it spread. One mother texted me anonymously. "I used to believe her. Not anymore." It wasn't viral like the TV spots, but it hit where it needed to. People were listening again, not because I shouted louder, but because I said nothing while the truth whispered for me. That Sunday, I got a call from Nate Carmichael, a local radio host who'd once done a whole segment praising Lorinda's journey. "I heard something," he said, "and I think the people who've been watching need to hear it too." I told him no. He asked again. Zilla was the one who said yes. She went on air the next evening. The segment aired right after the Sunday Blues playlist. The hour parents tuned in while prepping for another week. Zilla's voice was calm, steady. "I've seen that man feed over 1,000 people, sometimes with borrowed food. I've watched him sleep beside his ovens because he couldn't afford both rent and gas. He wasn't raising a business. He was raising his children without the world noticing." She paused, just long enough to let the words settle. "She may be their mother, but he's the one raising them." They didn't cut her segment. They didn't even edit it. The phone lines lit up. I didn't take any calls, didn't post a thing, just kept ladling soup and wiping down the counter like I did every night. That's the thing about quiet. It sticks better than noise. Nothing official came from Lorinda's camp. No statement, no clarification, not even denial. I got 2 blocked calls later that week. I didn't answer. Epi texted me the next day. Just one line. "You okay?" I replied, "Getting there." I printed out the transcript of the voice memo. 3 copies, one for the court file, one for my binder, one for the drawer in my desk I didn't open unless I had to. At the bottom of each copy, I wrote the same thing my father once told me after my first broken bone. The loudest lies are the ones that fear quiet truths. Things started shifting, not because I pushed harder, but because I finally stopped hiding. When they finally came to shut me down, I didn't speak, I just hit play. She thought silence meant surrender, but I was just saving breath for the part that mattered most. I woke before the sun, showered in silence, dressed in the only suit I still owned that didn't smell like fryer grease. It fit tighter around the shoulders than it used to. Years and meals tend to do that. I ironed the shirt twice, folded the green towel, slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat like it was armor. Not because I planned to use it, just in case I needed to remember why I was walking into that room in the first place. There were reporters out front. Not many, just enough to make me feel like I didn't belong. I kept walking, didn't blink, didn't wave. Inside, the air buzzed with low voices and rustling paper. Custody hearings don't look like court TV. They smell like nerves and processed coffee. Zilla sat next to me, folder in her lap, legs crossed like we were just there to renew a license. "You ready to lose calmly?" she asked, smirking like she didn't mean it. I smiled once. "I'm ready to win quietly." The judge walked in, stiff and square-shouldered, black robe like a curtain falling. I didn't flinch, but I felt Zilla's posture shift beside me. Lorinda sat 2 rows ahead, shoulder to shoulder with Verline, matching navy suits, matching stiff smiles. From the way they leaned in to whisper, you'd think they were planning a bake sale, not dividing a family. Her lawyer stood first. "My client has acted with full responsibility, shielding her children from instability, inconsistency, and undue stress, most notably caused by Mr. Durrell's erratic living arrangements and repeated failure to establish long-term housing or secure stable employment." I didn't react, just stared at my hands. My advocate, a public one, stood briefly, introduced herself. No speech. I walked forward, placed the folder on the bench. No preamble, just meal plans, school logs, photos, receipts, notes from teachers. A copy of the audio transcript. The judge leafed through the stack, paused at the audio sheet, raised an eyebrow. "Anything further to submit, Mr. Durrell?" I shook my head. "Nothing more, just what's already been said." They saved their punch for the middle. "Your Honor," Lorinda's attorney said during cross, "we'd like to bring forward a final witness, Ms. Mavis Lott, former business associate of Mr. Durrell." I felt Zilla tense beside me. Mavis walked in, neutral dress, eyes aimed just above mine, like she was staring at someone who used to be important. She spoke clean, like she'd rehearsed. Mr. Durrell was often distracted, emotional. He let his personal drama bleed into the business. Clients complained. I tried to help, but eventually, I had to protect myself. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't even surprise. It was something colder, something that sounded like, "So it's you, too." The judge asked if I wanted to cross-examine. I looked at Mavis, looked at the floor, then back at the judge. "I'll wait for my moment." She nodded. "Then bring your witness." Zilla walked up, steady. She didn't wear a suit. She didn't need to. Her voice didn't shake. "I saw Mr. Durrell sleep in a flour bin corner just to keep the ovens on. I watched him make 100 meals on nights he couldn't afford his own dinner. I saw him fill out worksheets with a pencil he sharpened with a knife. He wasn't absent. He was invisible, not by choice, but by edit." She stepped down. The judge turned to me again. "Anything else?" I reached into my coat, pulled out the towel, still green, still folded. "I don't need a speech," I said. "I just need this to be seen." She took it, looked down at the cloth, then glanced toward Rowdy, who sat beside Verline in the gallery, watching still and small, like he knew something was coming. The room went quiet, real quiet, not respectful, just listening quiet. The truth didn't crash down. It landed like a whisper everyone finally heard. And in that silence, something even louder happened. They let the clip play. We stepped out of the courtroom like we had just left a storm, but there was no cheering, no dramatic music, just the squeak of the doors swinging closed behind us and the stale air of legal finality. The judge had ruled in my favor, shared custody, final say in education and health decisions. It wasn't a clean win, but it was a fair one. And sometimes, that's all you can hope for. Zilla walked beside me, not saying anything until we got to her car. "You didn't win because they liked you," she said, watching the road as she drove. "You won because you never stopped showing up." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Outside the courthouse, a group of cameras followed Lorinda and Verline. The microphones were shoved in their faces like they were red carpet regulars. I kept walking. No one turned to me. And that was fine. The best victories aren't broadcast. They're lived. Right before the hearing ended, a clip had played. By accident or design, I'll never know. A short home video. Me at the sink, years ago. Rowdy, just 3, standing behind me in footy pajamas, his little hand wrapping the green towel around my wrist. "Don't leave like Dad," he whispered in the clip. The courtroom had frozen. Even the judge paused, removed her glasses, looked straight at me, then at Rowdy, now 6, seated beside Verlene in the gallery. The boy watched the screen like he didn't recognize the child in the video. But I saw it in his face. He remembered. I still had the towel, folded in my coat. Didn't take it out. Didn't need to. That image did more than any statement ever could. 2 weeks later, Lorinda appeared on a podcast, a trendy one, aired from a polished studio, hosted by a man who called everyone friend. He leaned in, voice soft. "Was your fight about love or power?" She hesitated, smiled just enough. "I just wanted peace." The comments loved it. Later, the same host called me, asked if I'd do the follow-up. I almost declined, but I didn't. In the studio, he asked the same question, same tone. "Was your fight about being right or being seen?" I answered without blinking. "It was never a fight. It was me refusing to be edited out." Silence followed, the kind that feels honest. The episode did well, not viral, but it reached the people who mattered. The kitchen got renamed that fall. Rowdyco. The sign was small, hand-painted by Tavner. Epi ran the weekend counter. Rowdy drew on napkins and asked customers if they wanted their name written in jelly. Nobody asked about the custody battle anymore. They asked about the stew, the bread, the warmth. One Sunday, Lorinda dropped off the kids. She lingered at the doorway, one hand on her hip like she had something rehearsed. But when she spoke, it was simple. "You're a better father than I gave you credit for." I looked her in the eye. "That's okay," I said. "I never needed credit. Just the chance." She nodded. Got in her car, drove off without fanfare, and I went back inside, flipped a grilled cheese, and called out the next order. That night, after closing, I walked into the apartment above the shop, opened the drawer where I'd kept the towel all this time. I placed it in a small shadow box frame above the sink. Beneath it, I added a brass plate. Nothing big, nothing ornate. Just this. Seen, heard, stayed. No tears, no applause. But for the first time in a long while, I breathed like someone who wasn't holding it in. Sometimes you don't need justice in court. You just need the silence that follows a truth no one can deny. Because being a parent isn't about winning, it's about staying in the room when everyone else has left.